Hi, my name is Pastor Sylvanus Harris. I am the senior pastor of the Mambc Missionary Baptist Church. I'm grateful to be pastoring now. Been many years of pastoring, learning how to pastor and being under a pastor who serves greatly. My first year here at Mambc has been a wonderful year. And one of the things I like about this church is that it's very family oriented. So there is no disconnection. There is a strong connection around this entire church. So as everyone have stated about their moms, dads, grandparents, ancestors have really been very instrumental in building the foundation of Mambc Missionary Baptist Church. I'll come to know the history of the church started back in 1876, One of the things I like about this church is that it has a foundation that is solid, something to build on, and something that we can make better for the future. This here is an historic area. This is something that most people dream about, but never actually get a chance to do. But in this season, in this time, God have allowed me an opportunity to pastor such a great group of people who have been instrumental to me and my family since we've been here.
Hi, my name is Bernadette Douglas Dixon, and I was born February 4th, 1955. Of course, my family was already here. My great-grandfather died in the old church and was buried. His sons, which my cousin Ella was just talking about, her father, both of his sons, junior and senior, were out riding the woods, as they called it. They were in the turpentine business, and they were out chipping boxes. Well, he died on a Sunday in church, and they just laid him out on the cooling board, as they called it, and they buried him the next morning, and his sons didn't even know he was dead. My father relayed a lot of the family history about the industry and stuff. According to Daddy, the land was donated for the building of a church and cemetery for the community by a man named John Carter. And I became a member of the church in the early 1960s and was baptized out in the yard out there in a pool. And I can remember there being frogs in the pool, and I was scared. After baptism, we had to come back inside the church and sit on the front seat. And then after church was over, we received what was called the right hand of fellowship. My little hands were very small, and it seemed like all those big people were just squeezing it, but it made a difference. My connection with the church has made a difference in my life. My great aunt, Melvina Douglas, as she was telling you, our four parents were very strict. I started teaching Sunday school as soon as I learned how to read. And so I stayed a member here at Mambc for more than half of my life. And then, of course, I grew up, I got married, I left the church for a while and went to another church, and recently came back home. My father was a cook, as they call it, and he learned to cook at the Mambc restaurant under Greek chef Kamanaka. And he would always refer to him as his first teacher in the cooking industry. This place around here used to be fields, and Of course, everything is building up into houses now, but it used to be fields. And we walked from Spanish Fort over here to church. And either my father or one of my brothers carried me on their neck. We had to cross a log to come across the, what we call the big branch. And then we had to come up the hill. And at that time, like they said, there was no air conditioner or anything, but the windows of the church were open. And if we were running late, we could hear them singing before we got here. And we were always excited to be here. We'd come in and like she said, Uncle Senior was over to Sunday school, and once Sunday school was over, we had just a little bit of break before we came back in for the 11 o'clock service. Our pastor's name at the time when I joined the church was Reverend Collier. And then after that came, many others. At one point in time, my Uncle Lester, who was my father's brother, he was the pastor. My daddy, James Zirin Douglas, was the chairman of the trustee board, and my Uncle Jim Douglas, was the chairman of the deacon board. That was just for a couple of years. We had many active families in this church. The active families was, we had the Carrolls, the Jenkins, all of those older people were very important in our lives, and they taught us, the right way to live. Everybody at that time worked somewhere. They either worked as domestics in the home, or I had a couple of aunts that were school teachers. I think Ella mentioned Aunt Letha. But we lived well, and it was because of the church. I remember Sister Knight and the others in the kitchen. They would cook for us for Vacation Bible School. We were excited to have hot dogs, sometimes popsicles. It was just a fun time for us. When this church was built, I was little, but I remember that we marched in the church. We marched from the old church up there, came down here, and marched in the church. My grandmother had planted a tree out there in the cemetery. She pulled it up on the way to church one Sunday morning, and she planted it, and she told my daddy, she said, when this tree gets tall enough to shade my grave, I'm gonna die. And she said, but the church won't be where it is now. She told him, she said it's gonna be a big white church and it'll be facing the highway. Apparently she had this dream. And the first funeral held in this church facing the highway was hers that in November of 1963.
Hello, my name is Ella Douglas Glenn, and I'm a member of Mambc Baptist Church, and I'm a choir member. And my mother and father has deceased. My father was the superintendent of the Sunday school. My mother was a choir director. And we lived not too far from the church, but we were in walking distance. We had to walk through the woods to church, over a branch, and up the hill. We had one building. This is where our school was from first grade through sixth. And after we left school, I don't remember all of the teachers' names. I think one of them was named Letha Douglas, a cousin of mine. And this church is actually mostly family. When it was a new church, it was mostly family, and the Jenkins were here also, but they lived in Loxley. And we had a good time. We played outside in the dirt. We didn't have fans. We didn't have air conditioners. And when it rained, we had to go inside. However, we had a good time. As children, we played together. ate together and worked together. After that, after we finished school, after I finished school in Daphne, I left. And the church never stopped, because when I came back, after we retired from service, I came back, the church is still here. However, this is a new church. We went to the old church in my childhood.
What I can remember about the church, when I was 11 years old, I joined this church, and I was an active member up until this day. I started preaching in 1975. I taught Sunday school here at this church. I was the second vice president of the trustee board of this the Mambc Baptist Church. I was able to, they had the church up for sale, and I bought the church and built my house out of it. And the people that helped me to tear it down was Amos Douglas, Jeff Quinney, Paul Douglas, and myself. I remember when we had to go down to the spring to get water and bring it to the church, and they had two toilets, one for the men and one for the ladies, that was out back, way out, had to walk pretty good ways to the bathrooms. And I remember when we had to baptize, I remember 5 different places we baptized. One was down at the foot of the hill, one was over there on Turkey Branch. We baptized across the woods from Mambc Baptist Church. I remember once we went up there to Mac Brumley and we baptized. And I remember the old church had a bell there, and we was going to school at the Turkey Branch School, and they would always tell us to not get under the bell because it could fall. And occasionally that bell would fall through the week. It never fell on Sundays. And we'd come out there on Sunday morning, sometimes the bell would be going through the floor, and they would take that bell out of the ground later on and put it back up in the steeple of the church. I remember when they put the addition onto the church, I was about the 3rd grade in high school. A man by the name of Lucius added that bell to the church. I remember back when we used to bury, the grave had to be 6'6", 6 foot deep, 6 foot wide. And they would let the bury, put the grave casket down in there, and they had a shovel. And the men would take the shovel and fill that grave back up. And they would do it in a hurry. And men would rotate. The youth would bury, they have funerals on a Sunday then. And the men would pull off their coat and rotate with that shovel until that grave was filled up and heaped over the top with dirt. The next thing I remember about this church, that my daddy was a deacon of this church. He was also the trustee of this church for about 20-some years or longer. The next thing I can remember about the church, that when we were children, Miss Melvina Douglas was the primary teacher. She taught the Sunday school, and she would teach us what thus says the Lord. And after that, we remember that Miss Stallworth, she was the musicianist, and I can remember the first one that played for our church.
My name is Shirley Ann Carol Scott, and I was born and raised at my early years in Baldwin County. And my mother and my father were with us and whatnot, but then things happened, and they were separated a little bit. And so we ended up, my brother and I, one of my brothers, and we came back here and came to Baldwin County, stayed with my grandmother. And she had 13 grandchildren in the house. And we lived up on Highway 31, my brother and I walked from up on Highway 31 to the school that was over there. And even the interstate that you see the car ripping and running there was not there. But we would do that, walk through the woods. And then things turned, and my mother got sick, and she had to go to Marianna, Florida, I think it was, to go to a sanitarium. So I had to come back here again and stay with my grandmother. And I was there going to school until I graduated, and I was blessed to be able to go to college, Alabama State in Montgomery. And I finished the course there, and I came out, and I was, then I went to college, and I got a teacher's certification. And as I would go and do, I learned how to do so much in reference to the children, and I would try to help them all I could. And I was a member of this church, and eventually I would work with the choir. I'm secretary, and several other activities that were going on in the church. And after my mother passed, it kind of stunned me, because as I wanted to grow up and do so I could do for her, and she wasn't here.
My name is Samuel Jenkins Jr., and I'm a trustee and a deacon here at the Mount A Missionary Baptist Church. I'm a third generation being a member of this church. My grandfather was one of the people that helped purchase the area and build the first church that was here. And my grandmother is I never knew my grandfather, but I knew my grandmother. Her name was A.T. Jenkins, Amelia T. Jenkins. She was very instrumental while I was growing up as a young fellow. The pastor that I can remember as far back as I can go is Reverend Collier, and he was the one that baptized me in that swimming pool. And just like Minister Douglas said, it was tadpoles and frogs in that pool where we got baptized in. I'm 65 years old. I was born January 5th, 1955, and I've been here all of my life. Went off to college to Alabama State University and returned. And I served on the usher board. I've been taught by Reverend Longmire. I've been taught in school by Sister Scott. So our church history really is something else. My grandmother would line us up, all of the young men in the church. She would line them up. She would sit on the second row in the church, and she would line the young men up. I'm talking about, I say young men, but I'm talking about 8, 9, 10 years old on that front row of the pew. And you would have to sit there and listen at the preacher. And if you turned your head to look over at the other one or started to talk, my grandmother could thump you so hard upside your head it would bring tears to your eyes. And everybody knew that, so we'd sit there and just be attentive and listen at what the preacher. A lot of times we'd fall asleep. But at the end of the sermon, she would always ask each one of us, tell me something the preacher said. So you had to pay attention for a little while so you get a sentence or something to tell her, because she wasn't going to be pleased if you didn't have anything to tell her about what the preacher said. These people were strict disciplinarians. They wanted you to do what was right, and they didn't tell you anything wrong. They were leaders, and they wanted you to be leaders. And to this day, I know of none that have gone off to prison that came up in this church. I know of none.
Hi, this is Johnny Hall. I wanted to let you know something about the Mambc Baptist Church. The Mambc Baptist Church is in a very surprising area, but a very good area. I learned about the church when I was very young. When I was born, my aunt was there to see me when I was born. And she was so surprised to see me. She and her boyfriend took me and carried me about 4 miles one Sunday morning to have me prayed for. And my godmother has been real close to me ever since. My mother kept me close. My daddy kept me close. I grew up, and one day I wanted to come to the Mambc Baptist Church. And I got up that morning, I felt so good, I wanted to go to church. But one thing I'd like to say at this time, the last pastor that was in this church before Reverend Harris came and took over, his name was Reverend Collins, Reverend George Collins. He lived in the Brumley area. Reverend Collins would come in and he'd give his service on a Sunday. He'd be service to the community. He would visit the sick. We would take trips. He was a fine man. So much so until he saw to it that he wanted me to do some, I'll say, household chores for him sometime. So he came to the place where he wanted to call me every time something went wrong in his house. So much so that I became just like a servant to him. And I was always close to him all through the community. And wherever we went, wherever we go, whatever I had to do, but we became so close until he started inviting me to his house to do the repairs around his house. I did that for years and years. Whatever it was, or whatever he wanted me to do, because he knew I was very instrumental in that type of work, because I did it all my life. So I ended up doing various shows for Reverend Collins, and it ended up, we got to the place where we became to be associates with quite a few members of his church in his own community, which was his relatives. I got a chance to deal with his whole family. His wife, his mom, his children, and a lot of his friends. I'd go into the area whenever they wanted me, and I would do what I could to make things happy. And that's where we come from today. Reverend Collins was a great man. He did a great job in the church. We loved him. But now we have a new pastor, Reverend Harris, which is a fine man. From day one, he has been a joy ever since we've been here. And we hope everybody that have ever visited this church, through Reverend Harris, who is our pastor now, or any other minister that have ever come to the Mount A Baptist Church or any other congregation that had ever visited our church. We hope that you can say like we can say today. Well done. Well done. Well done. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Verdine Boyd Hollings. I was born March 28, 1945. I was raised out at Mount Aid. My parents were here, D.C. and Arlene Boyd. It was 8 of us. All the children were raised and born out here. And we all were baptized. I was baptized when I was 8 years old under Reverend Lester Douglas. They had a pool out back. I was baptized out there. My sisters, the older ones, was baptized in a creek down the street on CC. They called it the CC Road. And then several of them was baptized down the hill right there. It was a creek down there that they were baptized in. We walked to church every Sunday morning. I lived between Highway 31 and 90, and my sisters and I and James Zetta Quinney and Marjorie Hall, Lena Mae Quinney, and Jeff, all of us would walk all the way from 31. They'd come across 31 down to 90, and we'd walk all the way up Highway 90 to church every Sunday morning, time for Sunday school. It was also a Martha and Sis. They were the Douglases. We lived all in the same neighborhood, but we'd walk out here every Sunday morning. And a lot of times we'd be coming to church. We could hear Uncle Rita, that was James Zetter and Marjorie's daddy. We could hear Uncle Rita singing, "I'm going through" before we get here, and we'd be running, trying to hear Uncle Rita sing. It was awesome there. My grandfather also, he was out here. Frank Austin, also Uncle Rita and them, they rode horses. Every morning on Sunday morning, they'd have that wagon. And sometimes we'd get on the wagon with them and ride out here to church. But most of the time we walked. I can remember when it was right up there, the old church. That's where we'd be running, because it was like a little trail that came up that hill all the way through here, and we'd walk up to the older church. That's where we attended church up until this one was built. Mr. Ishmael Carroll, he was a deacon out here, and he would ride his horse on Sunday mornings. Every Sunday morning he had a great big white horse that he had on that wagon, and he'd ride it to church every Sunday morning. It was the Douglases, the Austins, the Carrolls, Jenkins, the Boyds, Jerkins, Mr. John Jerkin. He had a daughter, LaRose Jerkin. She was a musician here at one time.
William Cyprian Sr., as I said before, I'm currently the chairman of the Deacons Ministry here. Now, I can't really tell you about any history, but I can tell you, about the time that when I first got here, which was in 1990, I believe. My wife is originally from this area, from Loxley, Alabama, and we arrived here, I believe it was in 1990. January of 1990. We came from California, Victorville, California, where we were stationed there in the Air Force. I retired out there, and 2 years later, my wife retired. And so her father is from this area, and I think her father kind of talked her into coming back here because I had my sights on Florida. But we ended up here, and we joined the church. Her father talked to us quite a bit about, you know, how good this church was, and the people in the church, good people. And we've always been in church during the time that we were in the Air Force. We stayed in church, never got out of the church. We participated in the chapel ministry while we were in the Air Force. When we retired, we came home, and again, as I said, we talked to her dad, and her dad talked us into joining this church, and I think that was in 1991. Year after that, I became the chairman of the deacons ministry. Remained chairman for, I think, about 10 and a half years. Took a break, then another individual became chairman. And he left and went to Florida, South Florida. At that time, the brethren voted me back in as chairman of the deacons ministry, and I'm in that position now. And I've enjoyed it very much. I like working with people, but I'm very concerned about folks working together and getting the job done. Very concerned about that. And that's what we have here now. We have people that works together. And that's what I strive for every day, working together. You know, you can get more accomplished when you work together, and that's very important to me. And we have a good bunch of folks here at the church, and that's what we strive for. But what I will say, you know, I've enjoyed the time that we've been here. You won't find any people any better than the folks that are here in this church. And I do believe that's why the Lord sent us here instead of Florida.
Senior Douglas was a father for 13 children, and I'm right in the middle of them. But we all were members of this church. And he was so strict when we were younger. He could look at you. If you were out of place, you jumped back in place. He was just that strict. And my mother used to tell him all the time, "You're too strict on those girls." He said, "They are mine. They're my girls. I want to raise them right." And he did, out of the 13. And when he got ready on Sunday morning, he would lead the way, and he made everybody get up and have breakfast around the table. But he prayed so long, the food got cold. But we still had to eat it before we left to come to Sunday school. And we stayed at church all day. Sunday school, 11 o'clock service, BTU service, and I don't know what else. But we had a lot of fun. He raised us right. Out of the 13, I don't know if any of us has ever been in jail. I was born July 12th, 1933, and I was raised here in Baldwin County, and the creek down here where we were baptized, some of us were baptized. And in the creek, we didn't have a pool to be baptized in. Snakes were there. We had to, when they put us in the water, we still looking for the snakes on each side. Because everybody, and we were raised in the country, but I'm still afraid of a snake. That's the only thing I think I'm afraid of. And if I see it first, he's a dead one. I don't play around with snakes. But anyway, we had a good time.
In later years, I think they was afraid that the front cemetery, the cemetery which was behind the church in the beginning, and now it's on the side of the church, that it was going to fill up. So they started another cemetery for non-members of the church who were members of the community in the back, and that's why we have the two cemeteries. We are all part of the same families, but just some people that are not members of the church, then they are buried back there, which I think is the prettiest place because it's got the most trees, but that's the reason. Choir rehearsal, that was another thing. Thursday evening was choir rehearsal. Everybody got off the school bus out there and came to the church. And we had a lady named Sister Viola Autry. She had a big, long wood panel station wagon. And she piled all of us in that station wagon to take us home. She also, when we had to go somewhere to sing, she had the entire choir in her station wagon. And she took us to different churches, and we would get up and sing. We also went to WGOK over in Mobile on Saturday mornings and sang on the radio.
And the first pastor I remember was Reverend Scott from Admo. And the latest pastor we have now is Reverend Sylvanus Harris. So I could remember from then up till now all the pastors. And we can say this, that Deacon Hilliard Jenkins, he was the chairman of the trust of the deacon board. And I never seen a man that the people admired as he was admired. He was, they really respected him as well as he was the pastor. Whatever he said, there was no question. He just said it. I remember one time we was out here digging up the stumps out here at the church. I was operating a backhoe, and one of Deacon Carroll was somehow another he got in the way, and I took the backhoe and switched it around real fast, and that bucket hit Deacon Carroll, and he fell to his knees. Blood came out of his eyes, nose, mouth, and I just knew he was dead. But by the grace of God, he went to the hospital, stayed about a week, and he survived, and he lived years after then. I remember also when I was a little boy, you could count the cars on one finger that was here at this church. Men came on horsebacks, some people came on wagons. And the next thing I can remember about this church, when I was tearing the church down, there was an accident right down this, at the highway we came to the church, and a man was killed. The next thing I can remember about this church, that I used to teach Sunday school right here in this side here, teach the young men. And I also sang in the choir. I was a Sunday school teacher. I think I'm repeating myself here in this church. And some of the young men I taught with Brother Samuel Jenkins and Brother Shelley Jenkins, and I say Shelley Jenkins, his son. And the Lord had blessed me from then until now. I've been preaching for 45 years. And I remember Sister Scott, she was the secretary, that made out the license and signed my name on the credentials. And now it has almost faded out down through the years. And I can say that my father was the one that picked this spot for this church to be built. Reverend J.C. Collier was the one from Pensacola, the one that built this church. And I think Brother Wheaton was the contractor that added on to this church. And I remember, I think 1944 was the first member of our family that was buried here. His name was Edward Longmire. And then later years, my mother passed, and then my father passed, and that's all we had buried in this church. So we've been blessed when it comes to the death of the immediate family of the Longmires. I think we got about the shortest list of the people been buried here. And I just give the Lord the glory and the praise for the many blessings that he has blessed me. As I said earlier, we always walked to church, but now the Lord had blessed us that we able to ride here. We got air conditioning, we got carpet on the floor, we got padded pews, and we have really been blessed from the time that I've been here up until this day. I never thought that I would see the church progress the way it has progressed down through the years, from walking till now we're able to ride, and we're able to just sit back and enjoy how the Lord has blessed us with the facilities that's in our church.
Well, as I said, my brother and I walked, and some of us, same thing happened when we had to come to church. But there was a pool, when it wasn't really a pool, but it was a water, and that's where they were baptized. And I think it was down that way somewhere. And the church was facing this way at one time, and then it turned up and went the other way. So, but everything was still dedicated to doing what was right. And we enjoyed coming, and we had the young folk singing in the choir. And then as we grew up, we took part with the other churches' activities that were going on. So we are just thankful that we had the avenue to walk on where we could do those things for ourselves.
My dad was a very dedicated man to this church. He was on the usher board and also chairman of the trustee board for a long time. And I have that position now, just recently been in that position. And I got some big shoes to fill. My dad was the first the only black county commissioner that we have had in this county of Baldwin County. And he's got a highway that's named after him that runs right in front of this church. He was very dedicated to his church, and my mother was also. She sang in the choir and everything. And all of my brothers grew up here. My mother had 5 boys. 2 of them are deceased and 3 are still living. All of the descendants all of my dad's brothers, siblings, and everybody have passed on. The last one passed on earlier this month. So that was the last one. My granddad had 5 boys and 3 girls. All of them were very, very successful and pillars wherever they went within the world. They were stationed all over the world. And they constantly would send donations back to the church whenever we had special drives. Ever since I've been here, this church has always been financially stable. Ministers never left here without being compensated. We've always, matter of fact, we paid our bills on time, and this church, we always paid bills off before they matured. And from what I can remember, I was told that used to be where we've got the fellowship hall was a school, and the church had donated it to the state to be a school, and my grandmother taught at that school. So my family has got a long history of being here at this church. The windows were open at the old church, and there was a lot of church going on in there. People used to get, ladies and men used to get happy in church when the preacher would say something that touched their hearts, and ushers would have to come and sit them down and fan them to get them back calm. I think it was a way of relief from the pressures that that person had gone through that week, and then to be able to let it out and then be charged up by the minister and move on for another week. It was oppressed, and but we kept moving on. Our ancestors did, my grandmothers, my dad, and we didn't even know that we were really being treated not equal because of the love and the care that they showed us. I mean, we thought we knew we were cared for.
But after I joined the church, I was baptized, and the way I was baptized was not in a baptism pool. The church took us down to the river with a little nice stream of running water, and that's where I was baptized. Our church eventually, we had a big storm, and I don't know what happened, but the big bale fell through the steeple and damaged the church. So after then, the people began to look for another area to put another church up. So they kept on till they started this church. And if I go back a little bit and to bring you up to date on how this church started, excuse me, we had a pastor and his wife out of Pensacola. His name was Reverend George Collins. He was a very smart man. He did a lot of preaching for our church. And I didn't know he was a bricklayer. I didn't know he was a block layer. But one day, they found a new area, which is the area in which we are in now, to build a new church. Reverend Collins was the block layer. He laid every block. Him and his friends laid every block in this church. They built it. They finished it. We moved in. And then we began to see a little bit further. Yes, he was talking about picnics, dinners, or whatever you want to name. We would have that sometime after church service. So this church that we're living in now has been very tremendously appreciated for this community in which we live now. This church has came a long ways. The time that I've been here, I've been able to see many ministers come and leave, and then we get another minister, until this day have come. This church, as I grew up in this church, I was very instrumental. I always wanted to be appreciated in whatever situation I was in. So this church being the church that it was, and people elderly people of this area realized that they saw a little potential in me as to what I could do in carpenter work and so forth. Many times I found myself in this church working. I never shall forget the pulpit. One day, we was trying to improve the situation. And they wanted me to improve the pulpit area. So I came in and I began to work on the floor first. And something happened to me that day that I will never forget. I was using some very expensive stain in the pulpit area. And I don't never like to use the term devil, but sometimes you can't help but say it. I was in the pulpit, I was working, and all of a sudden, it's a good thing I had my drop cloth. I had my drop cloth down and everything over the pulpit, and I was working, and all of a sudden, that stain that I had using on that pulpit tried to turn over on that floor. And when it did, I caught it. And I was so pleased when I caught that varnish to keep it from staining the area on that pulpit. Then we got a pool. And the pool decided that they wanted the pool area redone. They wanted me to do it. I said, yes, sir, I'll do it. So I went into the pool area. I stripped the pool area. I varnished the walls, and I repainted the pool area. Later on, we had an area in the back, but we didn't have an upstairs. We always wanted an upstairs. We had a flat roof on the back. We always wanted an upstairs. So they asked me if I could look into the situation in order that we could have an upstairs. I said, yes, I will. I went in and I looked, and I drew them out a plan as to how they could put it upstairs. So they appreciated the plan that I presented to them, and they went to work on it. And we had a nice upstairs apartment that we can have all the youngsters to be in Sunday school during church service.
I want to say that we have 9.5 acres. It was acquired back in, like I said, 1876 when the church was first built. The first building was actually built, I want to say, like maybe over on the, I guess going toward the east side of the land of the property, where the cemetery is now in the front. At the latter part of the years, they built where we're sitting at now. And the next building after that was remodeled and built in that same place. But I want to, and I'm just speaking for future reference of the church, because people need to know where we're headed in this season. You know, we want to, this here is in an historic landmark, and we want to be able to show people of all cultures. It's not just a black or white or Hispanic thing or any of that nature. It is for everybody to see the history of where we come from. But don't just linger on the history. We got to learn to build upon it. And so that's what we're doing, we're building upon it. And we had some real good people who was very instrumental in us being here. But going forward, we have future plans that are going to be taking place. I'm praying God's blessings upon everything that we undertake to do, and it's for the kingdom of God.